Welcome to OLC 4.0. This is term 2B. We are on class 26. Today we're going to be looking at assignment 35, question number 3, and assignment number 36. Today is Monday, June the 2nd, 2025, and this is Jillian Percy. Oh, sorry, I've got some weird stuff coming up there. Hang on. There we go. Okay. The ways to contact us. If you want to talk to me while I'm on air, the studio number is 1-800-465-7144. Be mindful that, of course, that means other people will be able to hear you as well. You can call the office, 1-800-667-3703, extension 2211. That's when I'm off air. My email is jillian.percy@nnec.on.ca. My other email is jillian.percy@nnecschools.org. That's the one that students often use if they're sharing a Google Doc with me. My Facebook is capital G, capital P, E-R-C-Y, space, capital W, A-H-S-A. And when you go there, you can give me a friend request, but please also give me a little message telling me what your proper name is, what course you're registered in, and what assignment you need help with, because I teach about 5 different courses, so it's a good idea for me to know which one you're in. There are 2 different YouTube channels that you can watch this recorded lessons on. There is my teacher channel that has all the courses I've taught over the last 2 years. And then there is the WASA Distance Education channel, which has all the teachers' courses from this year only. Now, the one thing about that is this particular term, this course is not going to be showing up on the school channel. We didn't want things to get too confusing. What is there is the term 1 playlist. However, the course has not significantly changed. Most of the slides are exactly the same. I just kind of maybe like say one slide one day and another slide a different day. So it's not significantly different. But if you do want to see the most current one, then you'll have to go to my teacher channel, okay? Okay, how to hand in assignments. This is my most commonly asked question by everybody. What are all the different ways? First of all, if you have a learning center in your community, you can go to the person in charge, which we call the DEC, ask them to scan your assignments in and email it to me. You hang on to your originals, you'll need them for the portfolio. Some people also have access to a fax machine at work, and so they fax things to me. 1-800-463-7852. That's if you're in Ontario. If you're outside of Ontario but still in Canada, 1-877-990-2023. If you've done it on your computer, like through Word or a Mac, you're welcome to email the document to me. Some people also do their stuff on Google Docs and then share things with me. When you do that, make sure to include me as somebody who can view or edit the work. I promise you I will not edit your work, but you just got to make sure to put me in there somewhere. Otherwise, I'll just get like a dead link and I won't be able to open things. I really discourage people from mailing it. It's so easy for things to get lost. If that's your very last resort, then you can do so. A lot of people also take pictures of their assignments and then send me the picture either through Facebook or through email. When you do that, make sure the photo is clear and easy to read, and make sure you send it as an attachment rather than just putting it in the body of the email. When you put it in the body, it comes with this weirdly odd size. And if you're sending me like 10 pages of an assignment, it can take me quite a long time to play with them all and get them the right size. Whereas if you send it as an attachment, for some reason, it's really easy. I don't know why. And then the best way, if you don't have a scanner at your learning center, is download a scanning app onto your phone and then take the pictures using a scanner app. And the reason for that is because it just produces a much better quality of document than just using a photograph. It's basically the same thing, though. You install the document, install the scanner app, open it up, and you use your phone to just kind of take a picture. But you can play with the document edges. You can keep on doing that until you have a document that you like. You can reorder it, hit Save PDF when you've got all your pages done, give it a name, and then save it to whatever you save things to, your Google Drive, your Dropbox, whatever you save things to. Then send me an email and attach it along with that email, okay? We are currently in week 8 of this 9-week course. So that means there's this week and next week. The last day I can accept assignments is June 12th, okay? June 13th is reserved for handing in exams, and this course does not have an exam, okay? Instead, this course has a long culminating activity. I estimate it will take people between 5 to 10 hours. It really depends on how quickly you read and write. Some people take a long time, some people take a short time. But I do suggest that you do not leave this assignment until June 12th. It will be very difficult to complete, especially if you're somebody who works full-time or you're taking care of young children all day. If you're planning to finish this course before grad, ask me for the culminating activity right now, like today or tomorrow. So you've got plenty of time to work on it because it is worth 20% of your overall grade. If you are a potential graduate for this June, I strongly recommend completing all the assignments by May 30th, which is, oh, sorry, last week. If you're a potential grad and you haven't handed everything in, please contact me immediately, okay? It takes quite a bit of time for me to do the marking and write up a report card. I have over 130 students in this course and 200 students in all my courses. There is no way I can get all the marking done for all of that if I have like 100 students hand things in on the last day, okay? Now, if you're running so far behind in your assignments that you're like, you know what, I'm not going to finish in the next week or two, that's fine. You can just enroll in the summer version of the course. I'm doing the marking in the summertime as well. There are no live classes, but you can still watch the recorded classes. That'll work fine. You can let me know. You can call the office. There's also a little Facebook link here. If you go to WASA Distance Education Center new page, you can see the little letters in blue. You click on that, it'll send you up the registration page. But like I said, you can also just message me or message the office and let them know that you want to register in it. Okay. Moving on to the assignment for this course. We're not doing any kind of grammar today because we're running out of time here. I can demonstrate the ability to read independently for personal, school-related, and career-related purposes. And I can use my knowledge of the organizational structure of different types of nonfiction narratives and short fiction to identify the sequence of events and main ideas. Okay. So this is the third question in assignment 35, okay? In this question, you're going to read the news story that's below and then summarize the news story on the next couple pages into one long paragraph that covers all the important points. Be sure to include any appropriate dates that are mentioned in the news story so that your timeline makes sense. Do not use exact quotes, but instead summarize what's being said by putting things in your own words. This paragraph should be at least 8 sentences long because it's a pretty long news story. The paragraph should have a clear opening sentence, and it should include at least 6 body sentences that summarize the most important elements of this story. The paragraph should also include a closing sentence that restates the main idea in new words. See the rubric below for a clear idea of what your paragraph should contain. So keep in mind, you're not writing a news story, you're summarizing a news story. So you don't need to use the inverted paragraph format that we use for news stories. You just do the regular paragraph format. Okay, they point out here, the rough copy is worth 10 marks, the final copy is worth 10 marks. You should show improvement in the final copy of clarity and understanding, sentence structure and variety, word choice and vocabulary, selection and explanation of the main ideas, and language conventions such as spelling, grammar, usage, and punctuation. Final copies that show no changes or only some minor spelling and capitalization changes will lose significant marks compared to the rough copy. Okay, I've included in your unit some space below because some people like to do their work right in the package, and that's fine. It's very easy for me to mark when you do that. This is the rubric. We kind of talked about this, our rubrics a little more thoroughly the other day. I check for your knowledge of the event, in other words, that chapter, okay, and your summary. Occasionally, I have people do a news story that includes 4 chapters. Of necessity, you lose marks then because I'm only looking for that chapter. And then I'm looking for your creative and critical thinking skills. What kind of details did you select? How did you organize things? How did you explain things? How did you summarize? And then communication, that's kind of your writing style. Transitions, your sentence variety, how smooth does it sound? And then did you understand the summary format and use it effectively? And finally, we've got the writing process, your ability to use it, including making revisions, and applying language conventions, grammar, usage, spelling, and punctuation. I also have the length of the assignment here. I've put that there because I have occasionally got students that'll hand me in like 2 sentences and they don't seem to understand that that's not appropriate. So I've put it here so it's very obvious for people, okay? Remember that the summary of a news article should still have an opening sentence that explains the overall main idea, okay? Because in a news story, a lot of that stuff's going to be included in the lead paragraph. If it's a longer article, though, it might have several paragraphs that discuss the main ideas, okay? So you don't want to be too vague. You want to be detailed enough that the reader understands what's happening. So if I said, the main idea of this news article is about the Blueberry Fest, that's a bit vague. I might want to be more detailed. This is a better idea. The main idea of this news article is to give a detailed schedule and explanation of the different events going on in the upcoming Blueberry Festival. Okay, that's far more thorough. It shows me that you really understood what the article was about and got the main idea. Okay. Once you've figured out the main idea of what you've read, figure out what are the main important points. So keep in mind, news articles are generally structured so that they answer the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, why, and then how. And remember, in a news article, those would all be included usually in the lead paragraph, and then they would explain things more detailed. You don't need to follow that format. You can simply go into detail about like all the explanation about who, all the explanation about what. Whatever makes sense to summarize is what you would do, okay? Because news articles aren't always written in a chronological order, I would say that you should use your best judgment. A lot of times, I think it makes sense to put it back into chronological order if you're summarizing, but there might be some occasions where you wouldn't want to do that for some specific reason. Use your best judgment. Now, in a summary, you really don't need to use direct quotes. You're summarizing. So instead, you would use what we call as indirect quotes. Hang on, my apologies. Okay. That's where you put the quote into your own words, okay? You don't need to necessarily summarize every single quote unless it is important to the main idea of the story. When that happens, I would still prefer that you put it in your own words, and that means you don't need to use quotation marks. So if somebody named David said, hey, we've decided to continue this protest day and night in order to convince the town to modify the laws that are favoring the rich, don't quote that. Instead, you'd say something like, David explained that they were determined to continue protesting until they were successful in getting the town to revise their unfair laws that support the rich people. And remember that a lot of quotes probably just don't need to be summarized. Okay, hang on a second. Okay, your closing sentence may restate the main point of the article. Here are some examples of possible sentence starters that may help you phrase this more effectively. The main focus of this article is on, and you'd finish the sentence. The writer is reporting on the main events of, finish the sentence. The main point of this article is to explain, and you would finish the sentence. Okay, those are just some examples. You can do it another way. That's just kind of an example of how you might want to do it. Remember that a summary should be significantly shorter than the news article. You're not trying to retell the entire article point by point. You're just giving me the highlights, okay? It's also really important. I'll have a lot of students do this where They'll want to give me their opinion on the article. You shouldn't have any outside information introduced, including your opinion, okay? Because that would imply that your opinion was part of the main article, and that will confuse people, okay? So you don't want to do that. Even if it's an article that you have really strong feelings about, which I know happens sometimes, if you really feel the need, you can do that outside of your summary, but you want your summary to be an accurate representation of what actually got said in the article, okay? All right. Next step is to be able to revise drafts to ensure that the ideas are presented in a logical order. You can discard any irrelevant ideas and info. You can ensure that the tone and language level suits the audience and the purpose using different appropriate strategies. Okay, now this is still the part that I find most people find either hard or they don't think it's necessary. I'm not sure which. When you're going to revise, remember the acronym ARMS, okay? So ARMS stands for A stands for add, R stands for remove, M stands for move, S stands for substitute. So you can add words or phrases, sentences or transitions, descriptions, or clarifying information. You can remove anything that's repetitious or off topic or off format. You can remove words or sentences that aren't needed. You can move things around. You might be able to move words or phrases or sentences or paragraphs. And then you can substitute or trade things, like take out boring and vague words and instead put in more exciting words. Take out sentences that are too general and add more specific details. Now, I want to point out, occasionally I've had people do this in a very mechanical way, like they didn't understand that you were supposed to improve it. So sometimes they've taken out great words and put in boring words because they thought the point was just to change things. Nope, the point is to improve things, okay? So I'm really looking for improvement, that it sounds better, okay? But it is important that you don't just do minor editing. Occasionally I'll have students fix like one capital that was wrong or one spelling mistake, and they'll consider that revised. When I see this, I always assume that students are not quite getting the idea. Revisions generally have three main goals. Either they're making repairs to formatting mix-ups. In other words, the person wrote an opinion when they should have wrote a news article. Or they're trying to make sure that their writing meets the format expectations. They've fixed the point of view. They've fixed the tone. They've made their opinion clear or took out their opinion if that's part of the format. That's your very first priority. Your second priority is make your writing sound better. Is it clearer? Have you added more detailed information or description? And then finally is the aesthetic, right? Like making it sound better or look better. Better transitions, improved examples, better paragraph structure, smoother flows, what sounds more connected, more variety in your sentence structure, improved vocabulary. That's your last priority. Spelling and those kind of things are really editing. They aren't really revisions, okay? They're kind of your last step before you hand it in. So think of the typical rubrics that I've marked with, right? We've talked about these. I always check first that you followed the right format. If you wrote me an amazing piece of writing, but it is an opinion piece and I wanted a summary, you're going to lose marks. Next, I look at whether you understood what you read, right? If I assigned one article, but you read a completely different article, then you're not going to show me that you understood what you read. So that's important too. And then thinking. Thinking involves things like an appropriate level of detail, putting things in the right sequence, including all the main information without putting in any incorrect information, out of sequence information, unimportant information, off topic or off format. And then finally, clear communication of information and ideas. Sometimes with the rubrics, I divide those all evenly. Sometimes I'll deliberately give more marks to the knowledge and understanding and more to thinking and inquiry. If you don't see the marks listed, it's always evenly distributed. If you do see the marks, then pay attention to that. Like this has, if knowledge has 10 marks and communication has 2, then I'm putting a lot of emphasis on your knowledge of what you read. So keep that in mind. Now, when you're revising, I usually make sure that I have 2 copies of my first draft. If I wrote it on the computer, I print off 2 copies. If I wrote it by hand, I take it to the Learning Center and get a second copy. And I want one to stay clean, okay? First of all, you're going to make sure that's handed in to me. But second of all, sometimes when we make changes, we go, wait, you know what? I actually think I like the original better. So you want to have that clean copy to go back to, okay? And I go through, I check, did I follow the right format? Did I use all the important formatting details that go along with it, right? Opinion or no opinions, chronological format versus formatted by importance, point of view, objective tone versus a non-objective tone. Then I look at, did I tackle the topic the assignment asked for? Did I cover all the areas of the topic? Okay, or is there a part I missed? Sometimes there's like a string of 4 or 5 questions and people will answer the very first question and skip the other 4. That means you've gone off topic as far as I'm concerned, okay? Does my work show that I understand what I read? Sometimes people will write in this really vague way where it would apply to any news story or any novel, but I look at it and there's no character names, there's no place names, there's no references to any specific events. And when I read that, I kind of wonder if you really read the article, okay? When I think that, it usually means you're going to get lower marks because it means you're not specific enough. Did you show that you understood what you read in a really general or superficial way? Or did you provide a lot of detail and thoroughness to show me that you understood it in a really deep way? So, have I written clearly? Do my ideas make sense? Do I provide enough detail? Do I provide enough examples? Did I use people and place names so it's obvious who, what, where I'm talking about? Okay. And then I can look at improving my style or voice. I think that this area is probably the hardest one because people aren't always sure how to fix things. If you're working on this level, your overall goals are things like making my writing more interesting, making it feel more smooth and connected, making it more beautiful. Okay, now I know beautiful is a bit subjective, so we're going to talk about that. For a summary, I'm not as worried about beautiful writing, okay? Because for a summary, my main goal is to accurately report what the original author wrote. But it is possible to do that in a very choppy, difficult to read format and to do it in a format that's more interesting and more beautiful. So that's what I kind of mean when I'm talking about beautiful writing. Like, is it pleasurable to read? I don't know how else to put that exactly. With a summary, you can think about things like, did I pick interesting synonyms and word choices? Did I remember to put things in my own words? If I look at it and it's all exactly copied from the paragraph, you're going to get lower marks, or you may even get asked to do it over if it happens too much. Sentence variety. In other words, it's not just all simple sentences. I've got some compound, I've got some complex, and then transition phrases. At this point in the course, you should be consistently using transition phrases in your writing because it is a key element to making your writing sound better. Okay. So making it sound more smooth and connected. This is a tricky thing to explain. I think some people aren't used to listening to their writing. If you read it out loud, sometimes it's clearer, okay? Writing that has a lot of short sentences can sound very choppy or stiff. Like, I like pizza. It is good. Pizza is yummy. Pizza is healthy. It just sounds overly simple and, like I said, choppy or stiff. But writing that has sentences that are all run-on or very convoluted and long can be really hard to follow or read because you're just waiting for that period where you can kind of rest your eyes and rest your brain. It's kind of like you're trying to hold your breath for too long, okay? If you have that problem, like if you write 10 lines and it's one sentence, split it up into several sentences, typically 2 or 3 smaller sentences, so it's more manageable to read. The other thing is, writing can sometimes sound confusing or pointless if the connections between your different pieces of information or your sentences are not made clear to the reader. A lot of times when we're writing, the connection is really obvious in our mind, but it isn't always as obvious in the reader's mind. So to help our readers understand what we're thinking, we use different types of connections that kind of act like street signs or road signs that help to make our intentions clear, okay? Now, you might be thinking, well, I don't understand. How do I create those kinds of connections? Well, there's a lot of different ways. Some of the ways we can use, first of all, remember to use opening and closing sentences for paragraphs. Number 2, use coordinating conjunctions like and, but, so, yet, things that can show how things are joined, or choices, or contrast, or reasons. You can also use subordinating conjunctions because they show a whole bunch of different relationships. Things like how are they related in time? How are they related through place? Does one sentence explain the purpose of another? Does one sentence have a condition or a limitation on the other? Are you trying to show contrast? Are you trying to show comparison? Are you trying to concede a certain point? And then again, using transition phrases, because it helps to show, are you adding information? Are you ordering steps? Are you listing a bunch of reasons? Are you giving me examples? Are you making a comparison? Are you adding contrast? Are you offering an opinion? Are you explaining cause or effect? Now, you may have noticed there's some overlap because there's more than one way to do that, right? I can show contrast through a transition phrase like, on the other hand, or I could show contrast through a subordinating conjunction. I could say blah, 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 however, and that's showing contrast. So there's more than one way to do that. But when you do that, it's good writing because it gives your reader a heads up how those ideas are connected. Okay? So after you've revised, now you go on to editing. Editing is just all the little tiny fussy bits, okay? That's where you're looking at showing me that you understand English conventions, grammar, usage, spelling, capitalization, and punctuation, okay? Your final copy that you hand in to me should be clean. And when I say clean, I mean neat. It should have no or few errors in it, especially if it's typewritten. If it's typewritten, you should have, it's super easy to make changes. Now, if it's handwritten and you make a small mistake, obviously you don't need to rewrite the whole thing, okay? Do try to limit it to 1 or 2 revisions if absolutely necessary, because it makes the work easier for me to read and it gives the audience confidence that you're handing in your best work. So if you see over here, see how messy this is? Don't hand me in something like that and say it's your final copy. And the reason is it's really hard for me to read, right? At some points they've written over their own words. I might not be able to read it very clearly. And sometimes it makes sense to our mind when we read it, but it doesn't make sense to the reader's mind. And when you clean it up, you'll say, oh, wait, I made a few more mistakes I need to fix. I also don't consider it your good copy, so you're going to lose a few marks because of that. Now, for revising, we use ARMS. For edit, we use the acronym CUPS. Okay, and CUPS stands for C is for capitalization. Remember that there should be capitals on the beginning letter of a name, the beginning letter of your sentence, and the word I. U is for usage or grammar. Make sure all your sentences have a subject. Check for subject-verb agreement. Check for run-on and incomplete sentences. P is for punctuation. The most common punctuation mistakes I see are using a comma instead of a period and using apostrophes incorrectly to show plurals. And then spelling, the most common spelling mistakes are homophones and commonly confused words. So like the 3 different ways to spell to, or the 3 different ways to spell there, or effect versus affect, then versus than, things like that, okay? All right, so moving on, we're gonna look at, hang on, I'm gonna kind of skip over there. Okay, assignment 36 is writing a news story about chapter 9, okay? Now you do want to use the news article format, which is that inverted triangle. You want to make sure your news story includes a headline, a date, a lead paragraph with 5 W's and H, middle paragraphs with important information, and then a final paragraph with less important information. So the good copy must be about 3/4 to 1 full page typed. If it is less than half a page, I will not mark it. It's too short. And then there's a rubric that follows this for the marking criteria. You are to submit both a rough copy and a final copy. Now, I want to point out, occasionally people think the next few lines are your rough copy. They are not. The next few lines are me trying to help you brainstorm your ideas. Okay? Who was this chapter about? What were the main events of the chapter? Right? Where did the action occur? When did the actions occur? Why did these events happen? How did they happen? I'm not giving you marks for this. This is just kind of so you get your ideas down. And then if I see a real problem, I can contact you and talk to you about it. Okay? Once you've done that, then you write your rough copy based on that. First of all, you want to put together your lead paragraph, and that should include a condensed version of your main 5 W's. Then you're going to expand on that. You're going to give me a whole bunch more details on those 5 W's in your middle paragraph. This part might include quotations. You're not going to have quotations in your lead paragraph. Remember to start a new paragraph every time a new person speaks. You cannot have 2 people speaking in the same paragraph, or quoted anyways. And then finally, at the very end of your news article, put the very least important details. These are details that if they got cut off because a new major story happened, it wouldn't really affect your reader. They would still understand what was happening. Remember when you are writing to use a 3rd-person point of view, he did this, she did that, not I saw this or I think that. And remember that in news articles, you do not express your own opinion, but you can use quotes that include other people's opinions. This is a quick little checklist you can use. We used it in assignment 12. It works here just as well, right? Just after you write your rough draft, quickly check that you've got all these things, okay? This is a more complicated news report rubric. And again, it's the same kind of thing that we talked about in assignment 12 and 13, way back in unit 1. Did you understand the chapter? Did you understand the format? How did you select your details? Oops. Did you communicate your ideas well? Did you apply the news format effectively? And then again, length of assignment. Okay? If you have forgotten, this is that news article format we've talked about multiple times. I think you're good for that. Where are we at? So as you're writing, think about who's your audience. If these events had happened locally and were printed in a local paper, such as the Sioux Bulletin or the Wawate News, who did you think would be most interested in this news? What is your purpose? Remember that generally in a news story, the primary purpose is to inform people about current events. The reporters are generally not supposed to give their own opinion on what they report, although they can quote other people. So a reporter couldn't say, I thought this was disgraceful, or this was terrible, or this guy's a troublemaker. But if the reporter interviewed a council member who said it, the reporter could say, Council member Amy Trout was frustrated by the events and said, This is a disgrace. When will the bootlegging stop? What is an appropriate tone for a news story? Formal or informal? Serious or casual? Okay. You're not writing to your best friend. You're writing to strangers who want you to sound professional. Here is an example of a great lead paragraph. Here is kind of the basic information that I've got. Who's it about? Is she a Thomas? What happened? She died in a car accident. When? On March 21st, 8 o'clock a.m. Where? In the town of Conway. This is based on an actual real article, okay? A 44-year-old woman was killed in a vehicle accident this week in Conway after one car broadsided another, authorities said on Sunday. Ishia Thomas died at the scene of the accident that happened at 8 o'clock a.m., March 21st, according to Tamara Willard, the Horry County Chief Deputy Coroner. So they've told us who, they told us what happened, they told us when it happened, and they told us where it happened. Okay. Then they would go in deeper and give us a whole lot more details because people are going to be like, oh, I don't understand. Was somebody speeding? Did somebody go through a traffic light? Right. So they explain the details. For our story, because we're talking about chapter 9, you want to expand on the basics. How did the event happen? How did it occur? Gary went to where? Why did he come back? Sorry, I put up a bunch of details here. What are all the details that you think is important about chapter 9? Okay. What are things that are less important? This can be kind of the hard part. Like sometimes when we're reading, it seems like it's all important. But again, think about if it was a real event. What are some things that don't really matter so much? Like, does it matter that Teresa was really worried about him? No, maybe, maybe not. If a crucial piece would be missing if that part got cut off, then move it up to one of the middle paragraphs. Things like possible charges, what are the police going to do next, comments by community members, things like that that aren't really crucial. Okay. Now, you do need to use quotes. Who are some people you could use quotes? It could be people that are actually in the chapter. Gary, Jimmy, the cops. It could be people that aren't in the chapter, but that we know exist in that fictional world. The nurses, the band chief, the counselors, other cops, or the RCMP, other family and friends, like the parents, the grandparents, girlfriends, the school principal. Oh, on the quotes, it doesn't have to be something that actually got said in the chapter. It's okay to make up an idea, okay? As long as it makes sense according to what happened in the chapter. The only thing is, please don't make up events. Sometimes I've had people just kind of write like an imaginary story that has nothing to do with the novel. And that doesn't really work because I'm using this to understand if you understood the chapter. So if you write something that makes no sense in relationship to the chapter, then I feel like either you didn't read it or you didn't understand it, which will lower your marks. Okay. So make sure you stay on topic. Okay. Make sure it's at least a page long. That means you're probably going to have 4 to 6 paragraphs. You want to have lots of details to demonstrate your understanding of the chapter. Also, news stories are usually written in the past tense because they already happened. You wouldn't say, Jimmy does this, Gary does that. I know that's how the chapter is written, but that's because in the fictional chapter, the author's trying to get you to feel like you're right there watching it happen, right? But in a news story, we're talking about what happened in the past. So I would say Harold fell down the stairs rather than Harold is falling down the stairs. Now, occasionally you might be discussing an upcoming event, in which case you would use future tense, like the fishing derby will be held on Saturday. But for this chapter, it's happened. So write about it in the past tense, please. And again, I've talked about this. I've mentioned it several times because it comes up so often. Don't express your opinion on the events. Okay. Here's an example in red of when people do that. It's a terrible thing when young people get hooked on drugs. Sorry, a little bit of a coughing fit here due to all the smoke today. We saw the results of this on Friday night when 2 teenagers died of a meth overdose. I think that more should be done to stop people getting addicted to drugs. Reporters can't write that way. They're not supposed to express what they think or feel. They are just supposed to report the facts. They're supposed to be kind of almost like a robot or like a camera that just takes a picture of what happened. It doesn't express their opinion. But they can quote other people who are talking about their opinion. So here's an example of how that might sound instead. Late Friday night, 2 teenagers, Penelope Boxon and Ridge Taryn, died of a meth overdose after falling unconscious at a party and being rushed to the hospital. Band counselor Edna Stevens was vocal about her concerns. It is a terrible thing when young people get hooked on drugs. We have to do more to stop them from getting addicted. Now, I know those sound very similar, but in one, the reporter is telling you his opinion or her opinion, and in the other, somebody who's important in the story is telling their opinion, right? The reporter should almost feel invisible. We should be completely unaware of how old the reporter is, whether they're a guy or girl, where they live. We should just not even be aware of the reporter at all. The other big thing is reporters need to write from a third person point of view. Now, we've talked about this before. The first person point of view is when I use words like I, me, my, mine, myself. And it's when the narrator writes as if it's happening to them directly and they're talking to you. I heard about the accident on the police scanner at 9 p.m. and I rushed down to Bridge Street right away. The police were directing traffic around the accident, but I was able to catch a glimpse of the 2 injured people. In third person point of view, if it's a guy, I would use he, him, his, himself. For girls, she, her, or herself. If it was like inanimate objects, like a building or a car or an animal, I would use it or itself. If it was plural, they. If there was, sometimes people again have the issue where they want to be known as they, we would use that. But I would not use I. I would not act like I am the person talking. And here's how that sounds a little bit different, okay? At 9 o'clock p.m., an accident occurred on Bridge Street. The police arrived at the scene and immediately began directing traffic around the accident. EM personnel reported serious injuries, but no fatalities. You see how that sounds different? The facts are still being expressed, but the reporter has essentially become invisible. We don't notice them because they're writing from the third person point of view. Okay. The other thing is, and this is a hard one I find, reporters can only report what they have seen or what other people have told them. They can only report on feelings and thoughts if somebody else tells them about them. And I'm saying this because in the novel and in the chapter, there's all sorts of times where the author says, Jimmy felt this, Jimmy thought that, Jimmy decided this. And sometimes when people are trying to write the news report, they'll include those phrases. But you have to change those because the reporter's not magic. They weren't out there on the ice, so they have no clue what Jimmy is feeling or Gary is feeling or the constables are feeling. They don't know. They're not mind readers. They can only talk about it if they interviewed the person afterwards and somebody said something to them. So like if they interviewed Jimmy later on, Jimmy could say something. Or if they interview one of the nurses later on, the nurse could say something. But they can't just read the person's mind. So, for example, if I said something like, the constable was thinking about how he was going to rescue the boy. Eddie was worried that he might die out here. Jessica was angry because she was afraid he might die too. I don't know that, but I can quote people. Eddie said, when I stopped being able to feel my toes, I did get worried that I might die out there. Jessica, his girlfriend, echoed his sentiments. I was feeling pretty angry that he had done something so reckless because I was afraid he might die. Okay. So this is the kind of thing where if somebody challenged the reporter, how do you know they were worried? The reporter could say, well, I've got it all on my recorder. Here, listen, Eddie said this. Or I wrote down in the notes, Jessica said this. They could prove what got said. It's concrete, it's objective. They're not just guessing, right? And then checklist. Before you go forward, check. Did you use the news article format? Did you include the major events? Did you include a title? Did you include the date? Are your quotations appropriate? Did you manage the viewpoint? Viewpoint is that idea of tone, point of view, third person, first person, that kind of stuff. Did you avoid giving your own opinion? Did you check for editing? Did you check for revising? So I'm kind of running through how to do the rough draft, but just like always, you would follow the writing process stages. So you've done your rough draft. Now you would go back and revise it. Then you would go back and edit it. Okay. I think my initial statement said that they were both worth 10, but I actually think that's incorrect because my memory here, hang on a second. Yeah, my rough copy is actually worth 10 and my final copy is worth 20. So I'm expecting to see big changes between the rough copy and the final copy. Okay, so that's the thing to keep in mind when you're handing this on. I think that is more or less it. If you're having any kind of difficulty with this, contact me. I'd be happy to talk with you and help you get things worked out on the phone. And if you are a possible grad, please contact me if we are not already discussing things so that I can make sure you're on track to be able to meet grad, okay? I will be back tomorrow. We will be talking about, I believe, cover letters tomorrow, okay? Take care and have a good evening.